I visited dermatologist Dr. Abs in his London clinic and I wanted to get advice on an easy, effective and affordable skincare routine. This video is my consultation with Dr. Abs and he's got a great YouTube channel, so I'll link that and his website in the description. What I'm looking for is a scientifically proven skincare regime.
Okay.
And a good overall regime, good for me.
Okay.
But also for my audience as well.
Okay. So what are your goals then with the regime? What do you want to try and achieve?
I think as a 42-year-old woman,
okay,
it's my birthday today.
Happy birthday! Happy birthday.
42-year-old skin.
Yeah.
To have a smooth appearance.
Yeah.
And maintain elasticity.
Okay.
But also going forward, have a regime that's going to just take care of my skin and make it look nice.
Something preventive as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing I would say is you want to keep it as minimal as possible because there is such a thing as too much. Even on a local scale, so for instance, when you have a skincare system that maybe has like 5 different products, 5 different active ingredients, might be a bit exaggerated, but you'll get the point. The pore is only a certain size in your face. And so if you put one cream on, the majority of that pore channel is going to be full up with whatever you've put on. So whatever you then put on afterwards, the chance of it penetrating is very, very little, which is why personally I'm a big fan of using just like a single product at a time in terms of active ingredients trying to get into the skin. Yeah. The exception to that will be something like sun cream, which you put over the top, but that's not trying to get in for obvious reasons. So realistically, you can do whatever you want to achieve with one ingredient or one product. The marketing out there makes you think you've got to have so many different things because that's how they make money at the end of the day. But realistically, the smallest routine that anyone could have is probably about 3 products, depending on medical history, type of skin, blah, 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 but as an average. So something to clean, something to protect from the sun, and something to give some active ingredients or an active ingredient singularly. So if you were to try and look at active ingredients, most people will say the most important one is vitamin A, the retinoids. So retinoid just means a molecule that comes under the umbrella term of vitamin A. And now that's been said for a very long time, since around the 1980s, first said by Des Fernandez. It's not wrong, it's very important, but I would say it's not necessarily the most important. I would say there's a competition between that and probably vitamin B3 as well. And the reason is because when you look at aging, you're essentially talking on a cellular scale and you're talking about what's happening in the mitochondria, and that's metabolism at the end of the day. And they use a lot of things like NAD+, nicotinamide, adenine dinucleotide. These are all molecules used in the energy process, and that's a derivative of vitamin B3. So it makes sense why things like niacinamide in skincare, when you look on a product page, it's got so many benefits. That's not actually marketing for once. It's true, it works on so many different things because it's used in the energetic process and everything runs off energy. So everything here runs off electricity, you shut that off. In fact, we just had that, the CrowdStrike global outage thing or whatever. Yeah. So when one thing goes out, everything's out. Right. And so vitamin A, if you knock that out, technically you're still producing energy and you still got access to other nutrients. But if you cut the vitamin B3 out and you cut the energy process, everything's going to suffer, which is how we get a lot of aging related diseases. So that's why I think vitamin B3 is a good competitor to vitamin A if we were to consider one single most important ingredient. But it's not easy to get good quality versions of those, especially in the long term as well. I think we've got more long-term studies on vitamin A than the others. So generally what we do, we look at something like high strength vitamin A. For example, tretinoin is one good example. The active ingredient is retinoic acid, which is one of the retinoids. So you go up as you convert from one form to the other, as you get closer and closer towards the bioactive form, which is retinoic acid. So if you wanted one ingredient, tretinoin could be very, very good. Yeah. An alternative would be something like niacinamide, which I do tend to use quite a lot on pregnant patients because we can't really be giving people those vitamin A products when they're pregnant because they've not been tested on pregnancy. So then we go to something like vitamin B3, but a lot of people that I treat, we do that, and then after they've had the baby, they just stay on that because they still get really great products, really great results, I should say. Yeah. Now, to throw a bit of a spanner in the works, I've got a video coming out probably in a couple of weeks' time, which might wipe all of that in the bin.
Right.
Because I've uncovered some research from the 1960s. I'm not going to take credit, actually one of my patients showed it to me, but this research showed that without using any micronutrients such as vitamin A and using actually topically applied hormones, you can reverse all the aging in the skin visually and on a subcellular scale, and it works on people even touching 90 years old.
Wow.
And it doesn't just improve wrinkles, it actually gets rid of them and plumps their face back, because when you look at someone who's at that end of the age spectrum, what you see is things kind of cave in a little bit. And in the before and after in this research, people in that end of the age spectrum, they had that, and at the end, it was just baby smooth. It was like a baby's bum after. And that, I won't give it all away, but I'll be releasing that video soon. So I'm gonna actually be trying that on myself. I've got a few patients lined up who want to try it as well. So potentially watch this space. Vitamin A's royalty status could be trumped by something else in the future. So a single routine could be a cleanser, sun cream, and then an active ingredient like that.
Great.
Which is a long-winded answer, I guess, but it's detailed.
It's great because my understanding, I used to own a beauty salon, had it for 9 years. I sold dermatological products.
Okay.
I know a reasonable amount about active ingredients.
Yeah.
Then when I closed the beauty salon, because the value system of it just didn't quite align.
Yeah.
Then when I started really learning about it, most of it's marketing, isn't it?
100%. I mean, you mentioned Dermalogica. I consulted for them briefly on how to use their product properly in combination with phototherapy systems. So went over to the head office over in the US, had a look at their labs and had conversations about how to combine everything. And yeah, I would say it's understandably marketing because it's a business at the end of the day. Yeah. But I just wish the marketing would be combined with good quality education as well, and the right type of education. I mean, the research that I've just alluded to, it just looks like it's been buried for so long because there's not a huge amount of money to be made in it. Yeah. And that's what drives everything, unfortunately, in all of medicine, not just in dermatology, but it's financially driven, unfortunately.
Yeah, and what I'm learning is there's just a few key active ingredients, like the ones you've said.
Yeah.
And actually they can be sourced at a really reasonable price.
Yeah, they're not
and
difficult.
They cover a broad spectrum of skin conditions. I mean,
I'll put it this way, I'm a big fan of the niacinamide powder from The Ordinary. I think that's about £5.
Yeah.
Like, it's nothing. I have it myself. You can't beat that for price. And that's probably like a year's supply. And yet you'll see people touting all these fancy peptides and ingredients.
£90.
Yeah, one patient messaged me recently saying, what do you think of this? Can I go on this? And I looked at it and it was from some brand, I think it's called Auteur or something. And it was like $420. I'm like, why? Like, you came to me because, I tell you how to do things for the cheapest price possible. And then you're asking me, is it okay if you buy that? I just don't get it. And people don't need to spend that much at all.
And it's almost as though the product price is so high that people think because it's high, it's going to work.
It's exactly what it is.
This might sound like a vain question, but
Go for it.
For the sake of the video, what do you think my skin condition is like for a 42-year-old?
Definitely above average.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Because in terms of the signs of aging, it's exactly where you'd expect it to be. So the eyes probably age the quickest. If you're a smoker, maybe around the mouth as well. Now the eye skin is very, very thin. So that's the canary in a coal mine. Right. So if anyone's going to get a problem first, it's the area with the least defense, shall we say, skin thickness and barrier function. So it shows up there. So you having signs of aging around the eyes, but not really anywhere else, is probably better than most 42-year-olds because they've got it around the eyes and in other places as well.
Oh, that's made me feel very... I'll show you my skin. I've printed this off because that's morning and that's night.
Okay, let's have a look here.
It seems to be all right.
Fine, so you've got smoothing cleanser and foaming cleanser. So if we go through it in turn, in terms of the cleansing, I mean, personally, I most of the time don't even use a cleanser. I just use water.
Yeah, that's wild to me.
Yeah, because if you think about it, we've had that for 4.5 million years and it's been good enough. And the only time we would need something more than water in terms of strength is when we've got something unnatural there. For example, makeup,
Right.
things like that. If we've just been wandering outside, or just sitting at home even, I mean, water's absolutely fine, because well, even if we sweat, the sweat is coming from, you know, everything inside us, which is water-based. And so water will dissolve it. Now, if the sweat's been allowed to dry, maybe there's some mud in there, blah, 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 if you've been playing football or something, fair enough, get a cleanser and go for it. So whenever people have a shower, I always say to them, look, run your finger over your skin. Can you feel anything there? Look in the mirror. Is there any dirt or makeup or anything still there? No. Then what are you cleansing off? You're cleansing off what is meant to be on the skin. So if you cleanse too much, you'll go through a phase where you take what's taken off in terms of a good way, then you'll take off the stuff that you don't want to take off too. You're disturbing the microbiome many, many times. You're disturbing the acid mantle, the ceramides, the lipids that are meant to be there. And so that's why some patients who have acne, when they double cleanse, like morning and evening, the acne gets worse, because you're actually deviating too far from what we call homeostasis, which is the body trying to regulate everything within a fine window: temperature, acidity, water level, electrolytes, all these things. And so by disturbing that too much, you actually make it much harder. So when people are showering, I say, think of that as your cleanse. What are you doing when you go to the sink? You're putting water on your face. What are you doing in the shower? You're putting water on your face. There's no difference. It's just a mental thing. But physically, as far as your skin is concerned, it is the same thing. So a cleanser for me is plus or minus.
Right.
It depends on if there's anything to take off. Otherwise, stick with nature that's worked for millions of years, bit of water, and then you're good.
That literally blows my mind. I think because I had quite bad acne, I was on 3 courses of Roaccutane in the past.
Yeah.
And so I'm not as much anymore, but very oily. So I think I've got like a paranoia of like that waxy sebum feeling, you know, that feeling.
So it's not a bad sign, because it means your skin is actually functioning.
Yeah.
And what women find is when they go through menopause at some point, overnight, they go from oily to dry skin.
Right.
Because the sebum production has gone. And sebum production, sweat production, these are really good markers of aging in the cells. So for instance, if you were to look at someone's armpit who's 20 and someone who's like 90, what you'll find is the surface area of the eccrine glands, which are producing the sweat, it shrinks very much because cell function is being lost. That's the process of aging. And so if your sebum glands are producing sebum, it's not a problem. It's visually maybe a problem. Biologically, it's better to have that than to have nothing at all, because then you've aged. Yeah. So if you have function, you're not aging, you're just overactive. That's easier to get a control on than something that's dry and you're trying to bring the function back. In fact, in that video that I'm showing, which I just recorded this morning, there was an experiment where they actually did that for glands in the armpit, and it actually brought back the gland function, and the numbers of glands increased, which you can't really get with even tretinoin, for instance. So it's extraordinary what we can achieve, but you know, the cleanser, that's not doing anything in terms of an anti-aging aspect, in terms of cell function. That's just keeping things clean. So that's for that reason I would say people shouldn't spend too much on a cleanser. You know, maximum £10 is probably enough. At the end of the day, even if they put loads of active ingredients in there, you're literally washing it off straight away. Like how much can actually penetrate at the end of the day? If you've got a condition and you need specific things, then we're looking into other territories. But for the average person, that's more than enough. And these are fine, what you have, but I would suggest it's a plus or minus, and it's not that you should cleanse, you should ask yourself, is there anything to cleanse?
So tonight I'll take my makeup off.
Yeah, go for it.
But tomorrow I'll just use water.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
So the first process of cleansing is not to reach for a product, it's to ask yourself, is there anything that needs cleaning off? No, you don't vacuum when you've just vacuumed. It's exactly the same thing. So why would you cleanse after a shower? You've dusted as soon as you vacuumed, right? It's the same thing. So then if we go beyond that, you've got to start with the morning routine. You've got the Paula's Choice 2% BHA liquid exfoliant, the salicylic acid, a moisturising lotion. I
just went to the oil-free one. That's why I put it next to it, because I found that first one like thick.
Yeah. The Paula's Choice one.
This
CeraVe
cream.
one.
So
okay, fine.
Oil-free lotion.
Fine. So in terms of the exfoliant that you've got, I mean, in terms of the point of that, you know, salicylic acid is what's called a beta hydroxy acid. So you have the difference between AHA and BHA, alpha and beta, is basically where the functional group of the compound is, on which carbon, and we can label as alpha or beta. In this case, BHA is oil soluble, which I'm sure you know if you've worked with Dermalogica and things before. So you've got to ask yourself, do you need the salicylic acid? You know, if you're trying to be anti-aging and you're trying to grow the skin, you've got to have that perspective. Is this ingredient going to grow or take away? Is it additive or subtractive? And acid is just controlled damage, just like microneedling, just like a laser. That's why you have acid peels. So you're trying to grow the skin. You've got to have the perspective of growth versus degradation. Acid is degradation. So if you want it to get thicker, an acid does the opposite. Now, some people may say acid can act as a stimulant to grow, but if you do that stimulant every single day before it's had a chance to grow, how much are you going to actually grow? That's why peels aren't done every day. Peels are done like once a month, once every 2 months. So you stimulate and then you grow. Daily acid is not necessarily a good stimulant. It may work in certain situations. I'm sure it does. I know it does. But for general anti-aging, it's better to focus more on specific micronutrients. So I would say it's not going to harm you, but I don't think it's going to give you a massive anti-aging boost,
Right.
Especially compared to things like vitamin A, you know,
Great.
tretinoin as an example. Then we look at the moisturizing lotions that you have. So this is, you know, my personal feelings is that no one needs a moisturizer.
Yeah.
And there was a time when they didn't exist. There was no pandemic of dry skin around the world, even without moisturizers. Moisturizers then were invented. Now people are complaining of dry skin. Now, part of the reason they are able to give hydration is because they use compounds which are humectants. So we have humectants, emollients, and occlusives that we can use. Now, humectants essentially draw in water. So if you were to take a sponge and drop it into a puddle, because the concentration of water is 0 in the sponge and 100 outside, it travels down that gradient, 0 to 100, which is called a water potential gradient. So when water diffuses into cells, it goes down that water potential gradient either side of the cell membrane. That's why if we drink too much and too much goes in, the cell bursts in the process called cytolysis. Now, hyaluronic acid is a humectant in use here. So they put the hyaluronic acid in saying, well, it's going to draw water. Is it really going to draw water though? Because hyaluronic acid is a molecule which is extremely misunderstood. In fact, I made a video about dermal fillers and HA,
Watched it.
which was 5 hours.
Oh no, I haven't watched that one. I haven't watched that one.
And you know, I get messages from doctors all around the world who've never seen that detail. But if people want to understand hyaluronic acid, that's the one to watch.
Yeah.
Now, it does draw water. It uses something called hydrate shells or solvation shells. But the problem is you have different weights, low, medium, and high. Just think of it as small, medium, or big. You're never going to get big weight or high molecular weight HA through the pore. It's just physically impossible. And so the only way to do it is to use low molecular weight. But low molecular weight has other functions. It can actually even be pro-inflammatory. But the issue is you've got 2 layers in the skin, the epidermis on top and the dermis below. What is the efficacy of topical hyaluronic acid making its way into the dermis, which is where it's meant to be, because that's where we produce it ourselves? The answer is it's not very efficacious at all. And that's why a lot of companies don't tell you the molecular weight of their hyaluronic acid. I even emailed The Ordinary many years ago and they wouldn't tell me.
Interesting.
And so when you see that, the hyaluronic acid stays too superficial, which is a technical term for shallow, but it still does its job of drawing in water. So it's up there, drawing water still, not down here. Now, if you're in Bolivia, that's fine because it's a humid climate, so it's going to draw that in. We're in the UK with probably the second of 3 days of sunshine a year that we normally get today, and we don't have that humidity, but it still draws water. If it's not coming from the atmosphere above, it will come from below. And so what happens is you put it on, you run your finger over it, and this is the key part, you run your finger and you think, oh, that feels really nice, so you keep buying more. But then the day you forget to put it on, something reminds you. And the thing that reminds you is the fact that it feels dry. And then you think, oh, I've got to put moisturiser on because it maybe feels cracked or tight. If it was hydrating you all this time, why would it have left you dry? Now imagine I made a product that's designed to do the opposite of a moisturiser, or the concept of a moisturiser, and it's designed to dry you out. What I would do is I could use this product for however many times you want, how many days, weeks, and then stop, and you'll see that it has dried you up because your skin will feel dry the day you stop. But that's what a moisturiser does. And so what's been happening is it's not actually hydrated you. It makes your surface feel smooth, so you keep buying more. And that's why I never use a moisturizer, and yet I never have dry skin
Your skin's great.
without a moisturizer. Because
Or cleansing.
yeah, exactly. Now, when you have the function inside the dermis of the fibroblast, which is a cell responsible for production of hyaluronic acid, it produces all the hyaluronic acid you need, but without preservatives, without a price tag, without a celebrity endorsement, all these things. And it does it for free. It does it continuously. It does it at the right molecular weight, at the right time, in combination with the right things, in the right position, all for nothing, because the recipe is in the DNA. So my perspective on skincare is not, let's get end products in, like collagen and hyaluronic acid, because I think that's dumb. Because the perfect recipe for that is already within our DNA. If that's already there, we shouldn't be focusing on the end products. We should be focusing on the inputs for the cells to optimize their function and let them do what they do best, because they know better than I do and anyone else, because I've had 4.5 million years of practice. So they know it perfectly. And so that's why my philosophy is always, let's look at the nutrition, like vitamin A, vitamin B3, possibly hormones, things like that. And then we get the right outputs anyway. Now, I know you said you like my skin, but there's a difference between men and women in that. Men have, relatively speaking, less estrogen and more testosterone. Women are the other way around. In this video that I'm going to put out in a couple of weeks, you'll see just the presence of more estrogen in a tissue, in skin, makes it age quicker. And so women, I believe, are at a disadvantage based on the research that I've done. And I'll explain it all in my video as well, but that's why men generally tend to have an easier time. And when you see the effect of estrogen versus testosterone in the skin, the cell numbers are reduced, the size of the cells are reduced, the form of the cells is not correct, it's not ideal. And even the thicknesses of the skin changes. The sort of stratification of the different layers in the epidermis, that's not even there. And so that's why women have a harder time.
Right.
So it's not that they're doing anything wrong. I know colloquially a lot of women say, oh, my husband doesn't do anything and his skin is fine. There's a hormonal difference.
And maybe because he's not using the millions of exfoliants
That
and
as well.
cleansers.
That as well. So he's got the head start with the hormones, and he's also got that as well. So I'll go through the evening routine. So the moisturizer we've kind of talked about. Then you've got the retinol serum. So I'll give that back to you. So the retinol is an alcohol form of vitamin A. So that's another retinoid. So that's good. Like there's nothing wrong with that at all. You've just got to look at the differences between retinoids are things like the concentrations and the carrier vehicle and what else they've put in there. So other ingredients or even preservatives and things like that, phenoxyethanol, chlorphenicin, all these kind of things. The purer it can be, the less rubbish you've got in there to worry about, basically. That's all it is. So yeah, the concept of that is great, retinol. I would say you've done the best you could in that as a general member of the public. For myself, it's a lot easier because because I've got a medical license, I can prescribe very easily whatever I need to, or I can ring another doctor and say, look, can you prescribe me this for my skin? And it's very easy for us. Members of the public can't do that. They have to go see someone to get prescription strength. So considering you can't do that yourself, that's probably as strong as you can go, that or something like retinaldehyde. Yeah.
Do you happen to know the strength of the CeraVe skin?
Not off the top of my head, no, but it's not important in the long term.
All right.
So even if you look at tretinoin, which is very strong, you've got 3 different concentrations, at least, in terms of what's widely available, unless you compound it. You've got 0.025, 0.05 and 0.1, so it doubles each time.
Yeah.
Even if you stay on the lowest one, after about 3 years, it's not really, pick a round number, 3 years, 5 years, whatever you want, you're not really going to look any different from that one versus the highest concentration. Because you've been doing it so long, it doesn't really make much difference. You're still going to get the best skin of your life. And so in the long term, it's not that important. It's more in the short term as you adapt to those things. That's all.
Great. I got those suggestions from Brian Johnson, Brian Johnson video, and then also I won't put this on in any of the content, but that guy on YouTube, have you seen him? He was talking about CeraVe and he said it's like pretty okay. So that's where I got that.
CeraVe's fine. I don't have anything negative to say about CeraVe, but I don't have anything to shout about either.
Yeah.
I think it's probably, as far as the general public is concerned, without going to prescription strength, it's fine. Nothing wrong with it, but it's not going to give you as much strength as prescription strength, that's all.
Yeah. And also it's quite a good price.
Yeah, it's very cheap, and it's probably about the right price.
Yeah.
Things can get expensive when you go to prescription strength in certain ingredients, but that's it. And I do get that. That's I don't see that as a bad thing in terms of a trick or anything like that. But generally speaking, yeah, it should not be difficult at all. I mean, I probably spend 50, 60 quid a year, total. Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's it, yeah.
Some people spend that on
an
eye cream.
Yeah, exactly. Or even one product. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
exactly.
they're doing a double cleanse.
Yeah.
And they're toning.
Exactly.
And then they're doing an exfoliant twice a week with a mask.
Yeah.
And then there's a day and night cream with a neck cream and a lip cream and an eye cream.
I know. And it's this whole ritual that they do, right?
Yeah. And then there's men and women.
Yeah. Like
men's version, women's version.
And that's the big myth in skincare. Like men and women, their skin responds to the same thing. Their physiology is not different. The hormonal landscape in terms of testosterone versus estrogen levels and ratios between them, yes, that's different. But the metabolism is the same.
Yeah.
Metabolism is how we take stuff out here and make it a part of us. Not just in terms of organs and blood and all this kind of stuff, but even in skin. And that isn't different between men and women. The way it may change over time and the way we may respond to certain stimulants because of hormones at certain parts of our life, that may give a slight difference, but the fundamental physiology is not gender dependent. So skincare should not be gender dependent, in my opinion.
That was one of my questions,
Yeah.
so it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Can many skincare ingredients, say like a high street ingredient like vitamin C, hyaluronic acid, collagen, when we see all these fancy names, can they actually penetrate into the skin and to the level at which they are needed and take effect?
Good question. So there's always going to be some penetration for most ingredients. Is there a clinically effective amount? That's a different question. And that's something which is product dependent because you have different forms. So if we take vitamin C, you can have pure L-ascorbic acid, you can have 3-ethyl ascorbic acid, magnesium ascorbyl phosphate, sodium ascorbyl phosphate, ascorbyl glucoside, blah, 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 the list goes on. Each of those has a different ability to penetrate. So it depends on the form, and it also depends on the concentration. It depends on what's carrying it in there. So for example, when someone wants a really gentle introduction to retinoids, I might use a gel-based system. Someone who's been doing it for a long time, I might use an oil or cream-based, because water versus oil is that argument. And our cells are oil-based, so something water-based is going to have a harder time penetrating, which is useful for someone who's new, because it means it less enters the skin, so it's a more gentler intro, less likely to react. If we look at someone who's a hardcore user, been using it for years, they can have something which penetrates a lot easier, like oil-based. And so these are questions that you have to pose on an individual basis to get it. But the thing is, people don't realize you can maximize the penetration of anything, and I really do mean anything, for about £8 with a simple derma roller. Because you look at, I think the reference is Stahl 2012, they used, I believe, a 0.2 mil derma roller in a study. Someone, I'm sure in the comments will correct me, but I think it was a 0.2 mil roller, and they rolled for, I think, maybe somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes. I can't remember the exact number. And the normal penetration, I believe, was about 7 to 8%, and I think that jumped to around 80%.
Wow.
The figures I might be slightly wrong on, but the principle is there, and it's in that paper. And that's with something that costs less than £10. And so it's not just it's a singular-minded view to say, does it penetrate? You can make anything penetrate. It's not about, does this penetrate? Is this a good ingredient? It's about an overall understanding of the physiology and how you can hack that, and you can make any ingredient kind of do anything you want within reason. So you should spend more time, my advice to people is you should spend more time understanding the skin's physiology and the biochemistry of what's going on if you really want to get into it. And then you don't need to ask, does this ingredient do that? Does that ingredient do that? Because you can actually just work it out yourself, which is the point of my channel. I want to teach the fundamental science so they can work things out for themselves instead of having a question for each ingredient.
Yeah. To my understanding, retinoids are clinically proven as an anti-wrinkle, anti-aging to increase collagen and elastic fibres.
Yeah.
Is that a correct statement?
It's It's a statement. I mean, first of all, clinically proven doesn't mean anything. And that's something that companies take advantage of because there's no definition. It's like the phrase hypoallergenic. There's no definition.
Oh, right.
There was a study done, I forgot the reference, but they looked at some large number of products available on Amazon, so a huge number. And I think it was between 70 and 80%, again, the figures might be wrong, but something significant, of products that were labeled as hypoallergenic still contained allergenic ingredients. So it tells you that companies take advantage of phrases with no definition, like glow and radiance. You know, they don't mean anything. And clinically proven is another one of those. So the question is difficult to answer because there's no validity to the question. However, I understand what you're trying to say. And yes, those ingredients will show that there is a physiological increase in the skin. But many ingredients do. The question is it right for you? Is it the correct form for you? What is actually causing a decrease in the first place rather than what can actually improve things? So when people say, for instance, you know, does this increase collagen and elastin? My immediate thought as a clinician is, if you're looking for that because you've lost some, what's made you lose some in the first place? Because you're filling a bucket up that's got a hole in the bottom otherwise.
Yeah.
And so yes, these things will or increase those things, but it's still useless if you're still aging the same way before. And so that's why my practice is always cosmetic and longevity medicine. Like, I know they sound different to the public, but on a cellular scale, it is literally the same thing. And so we always look at diet, every single patient. So if you're having the best collagen product, whatever that may be for that person, but you're eating a very inflammatory diet, it's not really going to achieve, you're still going to age on a systemic scale. You're just holding things back very slightly by working on a local scale. So they all work, but there are more important things than what you do in terms of ingredients, in my opinion.
What a great answer. I'm so happy to hear that because I'm on a quite a strict nutrition plan myself.
Okay.
Since doing it, my skin's changed a lot.
Yeah.
It's really great.
A diet is the most anti-aging tool anyone has, but you won't hear that often because generally it's not something you can sell.
What would you say in terms of omega-3 oils in terms of like a capsule or a supplement that then comes through into the skin?
Cool. So omega-3s are very important. They are what allowed us to basically go from tree dwellers to monkeys that came to the ground and stood up and walked. And you know, roughly speaking, 2/3 of the brain is fat. About 20% of that fat is DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, which is one of the omega-3s that we get in supplement form, along with things like EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid. These are really important for your whole body, not just your brain, but you know, even just the formation of cells. Like, your cells are made of fat, they're made of cholesterol. Like, you need these things. You know, your body can make its own saturated fat if it's needed. So fats are extremely important, and we get so much more energy in a fatty acid than we do in a single monosaccharide of glucose. And so getting these is very, very important. However, there's a difference between food and supplements. I'm personally of the opinion that if you can get everything from food, do so. If you can't, for your individual circumstance, the best you can do is a supplement, and that's fine, nothing wrong with that. The problem with supplemented omega-3s is how much of it is actually what you want it to be by the time you put it in your mouth. Fats can oxidize. And what can happen with omega supplements is they can undergo the oxidation process. And what happens with that is that the molecules change, and you can get free radicals forming, and you can shift the bond structure, and you can get things like conjugated dienes where the fatty acid, which is kind of straight, it's all wiggly because there's a single double bond. And then they can then sort of degrade from lipid hyperperoxidases, I think, and they kind of get even worse. And that is what creates toxicity and rancidity and degrades nutritional value. So as important as they are, we don't know how good they are by the time they get to us. There was a study by Pim Janssen, I can't remember the year now. She showed, I think she looked at some number of different omega supplements, can't remember how many, but practically all of them were just rancid by the time they got to you.
Interesting.
And so it's better to get those oils from the actual source, because one, you don't have the problem of the oxidation by the time it gets to you and the rancidity, toxicity, questionable nutritional value. But also, there's going to be other things in there we haven't discovered yet. And that's the way we're designed to eat, you know, as part of everything, that whole food, that species appropriate whole food. And so that's always going to be better for you.
Would you say there's a correlation in me having gone to a high protein diet, as in ribeye steaks? I'm eating lots of oily fish, mackerel, wild salmon, mackerel out the tin with all the little bones in, sardines. Would you say that's a direct correlation to my skin improving?
100%. If you've got a standard diet, standard American or standard Western diet, whatever you want to call it, you should not be looking at nutraceuticals. You should be looking at your diet first, because that's the most anti-aging thing you can do, not just for your skin, but for your actual health. Do you want to be in a wheelchair when your grandchildren are around, or do you want to be running after them in the playground?
And having great skin.
Exactly. and that's the difference. And that's why I always think the most anti-aging thing that people can do, like this is all my longevity research, if you like, the most anti-aging things people can do don't really cost anything. But companies want you to believe there's a magic supplement or a treatment or a pill or a laser or an injection or something. No, the most anti-aging things are getting the right diet, species appropriate diet, getting good quality and quantity of sleep, making sure you have good amounts of sunshine hitting your skin, contact with the earth, electromagnetic interference there, and they're the basic things. Once you do that, and I would add exercise, so you're physically active. They're not really going to cost you anything, but they're the basic boxes to tick. Once you have that, probably most of your diseases, if you have any, are gone. And at that point, you can look at nutraceuticals. At that point, you can look at bonuses, things like NAD+, which I use a lot on my patients, you know, certain types of extra training, things like that. But unless you're ticking those boxes first, you're fighting a losing battle, in my opinion.
Great. Fantastic answer.
Okay.
No, amazing.
Thank
because
you.
it's really what I've been talking about in some other videos.
Yeah, good.
Because people say, what supplements should I take?
Yeah, it's
like,
not a nice perspective.
Are you eating the right food plan?
Exactly.
Have you had a blood test to find out what supplements you need? And then you take the supplements.
Exactly.
Because if you're not eating right, then the supplements...
And if you need, and this is a key word here, if you need a supplement, all you need actually is to change your diet. If something's missing in your diet, you shouldn't jump to a supplement. You should question why you're having that diet. And that's the key. And people get confused between supplements and nutraceuticals. Supplement is to replace a component in your diet. And if it's to do that, there better be a good reason as to why you're not having that in your diet in the first place. The second one is a nutraceutical, which improves the way in which your body works. But if your body is being degraded from the terrible diet in the first place, what good is a nutraceutical going to do? And that's why the diet always comes first.
Great. Does taking hyaluronic acid, I feel as I already know the answer, does taking hyaluronic acid in a capsule improve the skin?
So there is going to be some people showing some studies to show some correlational improvement. That may or may not be the case. I don't really care. Because if you treat your body correctly, the hyaluronic acid that is meant to be there will be there anyway. So it's never ever something I have looked at, never something I would ever want for myself, never something I would recommend for my patients. If they want to, if it's a clean supplement, it's not going to do them any harm, it's made well, fine. If it makes them feel better, go for it. But I don't think it's going to help them very much.
My thought, I'm thinking about it from... I emptied a capsule and put it in a pint of water.
Yeah.
And left it overnight, and obviously it just turned to like a gel.
Yeah.
So then I imagine putting it into my stomach,
Yeah.
which has got fluid in.
Yeah.
I would imagine that the stomach hasn't got a lot of fluid in at any one point, because it's
you've
so
got to
now
remember,
it's like pulling it in from a bit like you said. I don't know. I
kind of. So what you've done in that experiment is leave it in basically pure water for a very long time. As soon as it goes into the stomach, it's being attacked by hydrochloric acid.
Yeah.
So actually, it's not going to be anything near what happens in the water.
Yeah.
As well as that, it will be attacked by things like hyaluronidase, perhaps in different parts of our body, and so it breaks down into monomers, and so that then has an effect. So it's not quite the same. But yes, if you left it completely, it will turn into a gel. But the body knows that.
Yeah.
And it happens everywhere. And that's how we have cushioning in our skin. The HA gives us that cushioning and padding. but it allows for that to happen because that's part of our physiology.
It's like, the way I think of it is, if you want longer hair,
Yeah.
you don't eat hair.
Exactly.
If you want hyaluronic acid in your skin,
You don't eat that.
eat hyaluronic acid.
When your kid is growing, do you feed them skin, bone and brain? No, you feed them the raw ingredients, the raw macronutrients, and they make it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a really obvious thing to
I
say.
don't know why I find that so funny.
If you know, just saying that makes people have this light bulb moment. Yeah, I shouldn't be eating an end product of biochemistry. I should be eating the reactants that I metabolize into end products.
Yeah.
What species does not work in that way? We have come so far from Mother Nature, thanks to marketing, social media, celebrity endorsements, deals, Black Friday stuff, etc., that we lose sight of it all.
Yeah.
And so that's why it always comes back to the diet and the basics and the nutrition.
This is all so amazing. Last question.
Sure.
It's one that we see all over the internet. Is the castor oil
Sure.
trick of people saying, I'm using castor oil.
Yeah.
It's amazing. My eyelashes have grown, my eyebrows have grown, my skin's never been better. I thought I'd give it a try, and after 3 days, so many milia.
Yeah.
I think because I'm quite a sebum-rich person.
Can you see how in some people it's good and in some people it's bad?
Yeah.
If it was truly good, it'd be universally good. It may feel great when you put it on your skin. How do you know your skin doesn't also feel great with a different type of oil if you haven't tried it? Beef tallow is what a lot of people try. I'm not surprised that works well. It's a saturated thing. It's animal-based. It's mammalian at the end of the day. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, it's not going to be optimal for reasons I'll go to in a second, but castor oil for me is a seed oil above all else. I don't need to know whether you like it or not. It's a seed oil whether you like it or not. And the human body needs saturated fats, not unsaturated. So when we have the process of de novo lipogenesis, we're making fat, if we like, and we're releasing fatty acids. We're making saturated fatty acids, not unsaturated. Unsaturated is very unhealthy for us all over our human physiology. And so it might look good on the surface. What about the cell function? If you like castor oil, fine, but switch to an oil that is much more biocompatible. Even something like beef tallow, I would suspect, haven't seen the evidence, put my hand up, but I would suspect that's going to be much better for us. And so I would always say, what is species appropriate? Castor oil is not species appropriate in my view. One of the reasons humans have this oil in the skin called sapienic acid, named so after our species Homo sapiens, because nothing else has it. So our makeup is extremely unique. And that's important to realize because it makes you think, what are we doing to our physiology by putting all these exogenous things on? Nothing's going to be perfect, but the closer we are to being biomimetic and biocompatible, the better off we're going to be. Now, if you use something else and that shouldn't trigger you, but it does, it's not a product problem. It's a sign that something is wrong with you. That's why I have no moisturizer, but I have no dry skin. If I was to use any product, I never have a reaction because my whole body has very little, if any, inflammation because of the diet that I'm on. So I would suggest castor oil is a no. I know people find that hard to believe because everyone says it's great. I don't doubt it feels great. I'm not talking about whether it feels great. I'm talking about the necessity of seed oils anywhere in our physiology, which I think is pretty universal as a no.
And is it coming back to that thing of where's that person starting?
Yeah. It's always going to be better than what they were.
It feels better. And also I'm thinking because it's an oil, it's now trapping in the skin's natural hyaluronic acid.
Exactly. And water and oil don't mix. Polar and non-polar substances don't mix. So if you were to pour them together in a cup at the same time, they would always separate. It's the difference between the hydrogen and oxygen in water and hydrogen and carbon in an oil. Now, our body takes advantage of that, which is why oil is on top, the HA is underneath, attracting the water. The water will not evaporate through the oil because it can't mix through, bounces back in layman's terms, and then we can't have transepidermal water loss. That's why we have sebum above the hyaluronic acid inside. That's the way it works. So if you were to go to castor oil from doing nothing and your skin was terrible, you'll think it's amazing. Don't think it's the best when you've only tried that one thing. You have to think scientifically. If a scientist changed one variable and the outcome improved, they don't go, oh, I found the secret formula. No, they go, I changed one variable and the outcome improved. I don't know if any other variables exist which can improve the outcome even more. And this is the big difference between medically qualified and non-medically qualified people. It's the way they think and things like this. Yeah. And so the castor oil is, yes, absolutely another example of that. You're coming from something which, a situation which wasn't good, so anything is going to look good relative to that. If you really want to use an oil, look at something like squalane oil. Again, from the ordinary, probably about £7-8, I don't know exactly, something like that. That's like half a year's supply, and like the value for money is insane. And it's not identical, but it's close to what we have in our skin, in the sebum, the squalene. So that, if they're going to use an oil, I would go for something like that personally.
Fantastic.
What I always say to people is, the more you do at home, the less you need to do in clinic. And if you do things right at home, you can make your clinic visits maybe like once a year. Yeah. For maybe, as an example, a course of Sunacos, for example. If you're not having that, you might not even need that if you're doing things really well at home. So you might only visit the clinic like once every 2 years or 3 years for a bit of laser resurfacing, because obviously you can't do that at home. Some of these lasers cost £250,000. So you go in only for the stuff you can't do at home, which massively reduces your cost. And so if I can get patients to do as much as possible at home, I need to see them much less often. And I know that sounds weird for a doctor to say that, but I prefer that because then my reputation spreads and I've got enough people coming in anyway for those one visits. I'm still busy whatever happens. So I would rather do that than make them reliant and constantly do things in clinic.
And two things on that, then their health is then improving because they're taking care of themselves, and also they don't end up looking like pillow face.
Exactly, and that's why, for me, cosmetic and longevity medicine are two of the same thing. So whenever anyone comes to me, I can't talk about one without talking about the other, because when you look on a small enough scale, it is literally the same thing. Yeah. And so if you're unhealthy, I mean, just look at anyone around you that you know. Think of someone you know who's got a list of medications as long as their arm, really ill. Do they look brilliant, or do they look the opposite? And you look at someone who, has no medications, is fit and active, never any problems, they never get ill. They probably look pretty good too. And so people shouldn't ignore that. If you have a lot of health problems, that's your priority. I know you want to look good, but if you sort that first, the looking good either happens automatically or it happens much easier and for less money as well.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Goes against everything that we're marketing.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.